Just a quick word before we start this podcast. At the time of release, I'm preparing to run 10k, 10 kilometres on May the 22nd, 2022. I'm trying to raise as much money as I can to send over to Ukraine to provide medical aid and assistance. So please go to my GoFundMe page, Toby's Wheezing and Groaning for 10k for Ukraine. There's a link in the blurb, that's easier, and there's links pinned to my Twitter pages. That would be really, really helpful if you could send even the smallest amount. Every little, as they say, helps. Thanks very much, and here's the podcast. Gru, it's another Doctor Who podcast, but this one's different. It's called Happy Times and Places, and nobody's allowed to be mean about anything. We have to accentuate the positive. I, Toby Hadoke, have to guess my guests' favourite things about their chosen story.
Hi Toby, this is Laurence Clark. I'm a stand-up comedian, writer, screenwriter and playwright. And the story that I picked for your podcast is Terminus.
Well, welcome everybody to the second instalment of Terminus, which, as you've heard, has been chosen by the comedian Laurence Clark, who was lucky enough to be loitering around on set and treated very well, by the sounds of it, by Doctor Who himself, Peter Davison. And so, if you read the history of the story, is perhaps the only person to have emerged from the recording of Terminus with many happy memories. But let's see, it's always been a story I've kind of felt the need to stick up for because people aren't terribly kind about it, and I think it's got some interesting things going on, although anybody that heard part one of this instalment of Happy Times and Places might go, but Toby, you didn't have an awful lot that was nice to say about part one. But part one it takes a while to get round to being about Terminus, that's why. But anyway, let's see how we do with part two when the plot arrives. So I'm paused between episodes 1 and 2 on my DVD, and I'm going to press play in 3, 2, 1. And I get a chance to... Oh, no, I'm not. So I am... Now, I might forget to edit this because I don't listen to... So I actually wasn't paused between parts 1 and 2. I am on episode selection, and I'm going to press enter on part 2 in 3, 2, 1. So I do get a chance to view again Dominic Guard's... Now we know, don't we? Now we know what it's all about, which I think is a lovely, script-wise, is a lovely end of episode where you suddenly go, oh heck! So this is why this ship is sort of abandoned, and as I say, it brings with it a lot of imagery and fear and sort of biblical fear because when I did, as I say, when I did RE, there were stories of leper colonies, and lepers feature quite prominently, don't they, in sort of miraculous cures and things like that. So there's something sort of ancient about them and biblical, which always gives, a sense of grandeur, but also a sense of, when you're learning about it, you sort of go, oh, well, thank goodness we've wiped that out and don't have that anymore. So to suddenly have it in the future in space, that's a nice, that's a nice conglomeration of fears. Yeah, no, we don't. Yeah, but I do like the fact that you've got the Doctor and co sort of on the move while this is happening. It just gives a bit of energy and drive to it. But now they're sort of trapped against the wall. So it's the cliffhanger for the Doctor, even though it's Olvia doing the speaking. That's quite cleverly sort of told, in a sense, the visual grammar to still have the Doctor the focus of it. Although again, they're clambering from one small. It's not just corridors. There are a few staircases in this story as well. So, okay, we've got the arrival of a new spaceship, and Terminus seems to be this sort of scaffolding in space, which is quite novel. Yeah, we like Lisa Goddard's hair. So yeah, I remember learning about lepers in Arian, and there was this guy who'd been canonized. He became a saint, and it's a story that always stuck with me, where he was working to help a leper colony and treat people, and he accidentally poured boiling water on his foot, and when he didn't feel anything, he realized that, oh, I have it too. And that always stuck me, that moment of realization, where which I suspect he probably saw coming, but in that moment where you go, oh, okay, that's me, I'm going to die, and perfectly avoidably, because the reason he was in harm's way is because he's put himself there to help people. But of course, there's the idea that the diseased people are stigmatized. I know there was a little bit of controversy about that when this story went out. But I don't think there's a cruelty about it. I think, as I say, it's invoking, because there are still parts of the world where it's an issue. But I think I see it more as invoking the biblical rather than reflecting anything that's going on in deprived parts of the world. So I don't think, I don't think it's being, I don't think I could see why, people with a special interest in wanting the awareness of the condition to be correct would object. I absolutely understand that, but I can also understand why they felt it was okay to have it in the story. And these film sequences look so good, don't they? It's just such a shame that they are this beautiful quality, gloriously lit. You can see the reflection of the grills against the wall. This high end looking stuff is for stuff the story could really do without, which is essentially sidelining Tegan and Turlough in the middle two episodes. Oh, and you see, that's Nyssa has the disease. That's the moment, isn't it? That's the pouring the boiling water on the foot, but it's telling us, the viewer, oh no, and so the companion in peril. How's she going to get out of this? Especially as we soon learn that the way that the Lazar disease is cured is pretty hit and miss, and mostly miss. That's a nice image of Dominic Guard, hiding in the shadows, ashamed. I think that's very human, and I like it. Brilliant shot of a ladder and some feet. Yeah, this is worth the really expensive film stock and the attention to detail of the beautiful lighting. I'd always thought that Turlough sort of kept his school jacket on. I rather like this waistcoat that he's got on. I think the first thing you'd do, though, wouldn't you? You'd get rid of your tie. That's the costuming thing, isn't it? No, we have to know it's Turlough because he still dresses as a schoolboy. Whereas, of course, everybody who goes to school and wears a school uniform knows is the first thing you do when you get the opportunity. When you're wearing a school uniform, is to get out of your school uniform. But I suppose that's going, look, he's so alien, he even likes his school uniform. This is very sweet. And I love his boots. I think we get a good shot of them later. I seem to recall there's lots of shots of feet going down steps in this story. I don't know why. Oh, yes. What do you remember of Doctor Who? I remember the monsters coming out of the sea. Oh, I remember the alien with the one eye and the squiggly face. Oh, I remember hands coming out of the earth. I remember lots of shots of metal staircases with feet walking down them. And I like the backstory of they supposedly offer a cure. Yeah, so if nobody ever comes back, what I don't quite know what's going on? Do you send them there anyway in the hope? That seems a bit. It seems a bit odd to get away with that level of customer service. Who are you? We're the people that cure the lasers. How many of you cured? Precisely none. Well, we'll send you our lasers anyway. I think. I mean, I'm not an expert on capitalist economies, but I think capitalism succeeds where there is a gap in the market and somebody, some entrepreneur, dives in. And I wasn't there somebody hanging around the centre of the known universe that went, the only people, the people who've got the monopoly on laser cure, are currently not curing any lasers. I mean, if we just cured 3, I think we'll offer a discount. We'll cure at least one of your 50 lasers or your money back. That's still better than what's being offered at the moment. But this is me who not having seen this story for a while, so maybe I've missed something important. But I do seem to recall, because when I got, and again, the veneer costume on film looks absolutely fantastic, and the red of that cloak and the armor there, it's Arak, isn't it? Because he's got the red cloak on, looks absolutely magnificent over that grill, and with the film camera underneath and capturing it on that on that film stock. And for the rest of its time on screen, it's clattery and on videotape. And here is another actor, Martin Potter, who, a bit like Dominic Gard, was a beautiful young man. Martin Potter was in Satyricon, wasn't he? Had a couple of sort of moments in the spotlight. Well, he did a Robin Hood as well, didn't he? That George Galaccio did. But you expect those actors to sort of shine and be beautiful and then sort of retire, because they never again could recapture their beautiful youth. So they and Fellini no longer returned their calls or whatever, so they went and lived somewhere romantic and wrote poetry and somehow lived as these successful. These actors who have these brief flickering careers somehow manage to spend the rest of their lives being fine, whereas most of us, even if we're fairly regularly employed, still need another job in 3 weeks or we die of starvation. But Martin Potter sort of had that, but then is still around and has an agent enough to sort of be available to play a supporting part in a Doctor Who story. And you think that's a really curious hybrid of a career. Now, definitely gonna, and I don't know if it will be for this episode, but Peter Benson as Boar, I think is probably the best thing about the whole story. It's a wonderful idiosyncratic performance, and of course this is way before he became well known for playing Bernie Scripps in Heartbeat, but he was still a known actor. I think he's in the Henrys of the BBC Shakespeare, and he's in Blackadder, of course. A really interesting actor with a sort of slightly quizzical hauntedness about him. He's sort of slightly cadaverous and yet sort of benign. He's like a friendly corpse. Lovely actor. I once had lunch with him. I was doing a Shakespeare in the Park, and the actors were... this is a Eric Saywood script-edited story, so the character dynamics have to be people hating each other and rowing. So Valgard and Arak basically spend the whole thing yelling at each other. Valgard, of course, is played by Andrew Burt, who is wonderful in Blake Seven, The Harvest of Kairos, as whatever he's called... sexist garage mechanic man, whatever he is. He calls Servalan woman, doesn't he? And she kisses her roughly, and she goes, "That primitive thing you subjected me to, I'd like you to do it again, because I'm a lady, and I'm a sexy space lady, and I like being dominated by bits of rough." And that's what Andrew Burt was. He was also the first Jack Sugden in Emmerdale Farm. He then went away and was and went and played Gulliver in Gulliver's Travels. Did lots of BBC stuff. Had a very, very good career, Andrew Burt, and then latterly was sort of popping up in Alan Partridge-y type things, but then became, I think, like Dominic Gard is a child psychologist. He became a psychologist in London. he emailed me out of the blue. He put something on my website when Rodney Bennett, the director of Mask of Mandragora and Ark in Space and Sontaran Experiment, died, because Rodney had directed Andrew in some stuff, and he said, and we had a little bit of a back and forth, and I said, it's nice because I know your work, but he I think he never wanted to be interviewed about his acting because he'd put it all behind him, which is odd because unlike a lot of people, he'd had quite a lot of relatively recent credits. Now, I didn't ask him for an interview because I'd already been told that he was reluctant to engage, but he said he looked forward to meeting me at Rodney's memorial service, which I never eventually made it to. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to meet you there. And he said, it'll be lovely to meet you one day. And I thought, well, that'd be good. So, maybe convene a meeting. And then, once somebody's realised that you're actually all right, you can then say, well, can you do one interview? And I was, I was on my sort of list of things to address at some point. And then Andrew Burt died. I was quite surprised. He passed away the same year that Peter Benson, Bohr, passed away, and the same year that John Waller, the fight director of Terminus, passed away. It was 2 or 3 years ago now. It was a bad year for Terminus. The famous moment of Nyssa removing her dress, I'd read about this in Doctor Who magazine, and it was sort of talked of, and Sarah Sutton was asked about it in interviews, and the way it was reported at the time, you would think it was the filthiest thing imaginable. It is still quite an odd thing. I mean, I suppose she's removing her skirt because she's quite hot, I suppose, and she's got this petticoat thing underneath. It is quite an odd moment, but it was certainly talked about an awful lot. I don't have an awful lot to say about it. It's quite static, isn't it? And poor old Dominic Gar's just having to sort of stand there and slightly look away. While a very slow robot makes somebody in a petticoat amble away, crying at him plaintively. Yes, quite static. I do like the sort of makeup on the veneer. Martin Potter looks a bit like Dracula, doesn't he? He would have been a good Dracula, actually. He's got that sort of sort of haunted dead youth thing about him. I think Andrew Burt's a lovely actor anyway, a very nice, gruff actor that brings realism to everything he does. But everyone's a bit... It's a hard sell, though, isn't it? And this Tim Munro playing Sigurd is one of the bandits in Creature from the Pit. So his Doctor Who career straddles Creature from the Pit and Terminus. Still about. He was in an episode of Casualty or Holby City, directed by Steve Hughes, who directed the one in the department store with James Corden. That's Closing Time. And I remember saying, Steve, you cast Tim Munro, he was in some Doctor Who's, because I met Steve Hughes at a convention. I mean, I sort of like the dour thing about, this is downbeat and a bit depressing. I can see what they're going for, but it's quite a hard sell for the drama in something that's already set in a grey spaceship, where there's lots of people who are ill. And then the people who are looking after the ill people are all a bit miserable and hate each other. The people who live in the TARDIS are suspicious of each other and hate each other. Dominic Guard's a space pirate who's really sad. So you're sort of aching to get Peter Davison and Lisa Goddard back into it. And the strange man with the moustache, Peter Benson, who's not in this episode again, I think. Oh, and of course, they live... Are they addicted to this drug? Is that what it is? Or it's the thing it's the bittersweet taste of life. Thanks. It's also the lighting equipment from the planet Frontios. It's basically somebody invented some luminous gel, and people who made science fiction for the BBC went, well, that looks quite futuristic, even though you can now get it in shops. That's a hard thing to ask an actor to do. Yes, Andrew, what you have to do is you have to completely drop your guard and look really closely at that thumb, and she's then going to slightly shove you. And your armour is going to clatter because it's actually made of plastic. But I can see what they're going for with the veneer costumes, which are a nice design, very sort of skeletal. Again, if this was sort of all on film and shadowy, it would be ominous. I think we have a close up of a wall here, don't we? Yeah. Let's not follow the lift down. Let's make the camera go up and look at closing on the wall. Oh, some stairs. Boot shot, boot porn. I love these boots. That's great. They are sexy boots. I like boots. I like wearing boots. I'm not tall or elegant enough to carry them off, but there's something empowering about having quite high boots. Although now at my age, I've been wearing compression socks to jog with, and getting those off is a production number. I wish I could sort of do it in stages. Well, I sort of do. I roll them down, and then I bend forward, then I point them around the ankle, and then I need a rest. So I know that boots may look kinky. Boots it's all very well being kinky, but actually the practicality of getting them on and off is no kinky matter. It's quite a laborious exercise that frankly leaves you too puffed out to be remotely kinky betwixt addition and removal. So I don't know what Boar's off to do. He said the reading's still climbing, so there's I have to confess I don't really know what happens in Terminus particularly. Well, I mean, I've probably seen it a good. What's the average I've seen a Doctor Who story? What's the average you've seen a Doctor Who story? I would say I've seen this a good 10 to 15 times, which is probably it's amongst the least that I've seen a classic Doctor Who story. Certainly one of my least watched, but I would still say, that numbers probably between 8 and 12 maybe. The Garm. I rather like the Garm. The red eyes don't work. Somebody's gone, let's make it look alive, and we can't have eyes that open or close. We can't have practical eyes, so bung a couple of bulbs in because that makes it look alive. But it also makes it look a bit phony. But I think having a giant dog thing is okay, and he's quite sweet. Played by an R.J. Bell. I saw in he's in The Green Man, playing a sort of an American academic, and I think he was American or Canadian, the actor who plays the Garm. So poor old. That's because Nissa's cut her thumb, hasn't she? So she's dripping blood, which means that the Doctor and Kari have to follow her around the corridor. Yes, am I? And this is quite sort of intelligent plotting in the sense that it's this medical facility where, of course, you would sterilize the place before carrying out any procedures, so that adds to a little bit of jeopardy. The leper colony iconography is, but again, it's quite to add to the arguing Viking people, skeleton Viking tired vampire guards, and then you've got the sort of sack wearing ill people and the sad space pirate. You are. That's a nicely lit there, though. Actually, but there are a lot of corridors and ventilation shafts in this period of Doctor Who. That's nice. I like a descending door that people have to sort of dive underneath, and that's a nice change in lighting state. There's not an awful lot of time spent. The Doctor hasn't actually had an awful lot to do, and you sort of think Davison is a great strength of his era, and I wonder if there's not enough oomph in this episode so far, because actually Davison is very good at corridor acting, because he'll go the wrong way, or he'll give it a bit of thought before nearly heading in one direction and then heading in the other, or he'll give it a bit of speed as he leaves the scene and comes into it. And he's got that breathlessness, and he's worth his weight in gold. Actually, Peter Davison, but he's not been able to do much of that. I don't know if they've been told not to move too quickly, lest the set fall to bits. But I can, you can see the aesthetic that they're going for, which is grim and doom laden and sort of murky and sweaty and grimy and diseased, and that could, I think you could see this story being done now and really working and being especially you could tighten it up a bit. So it's not necessarily an ill thought out vibe to go for. I just think it's they aren't quite pulling it off. I'm supposed to be accentuating the positive. I don't mind it. As I say, I like the story idea. I think it's novel. I like all of the things that they're going for. I just wish they'd had a bit more success, maybe tying it all together. Because a lot of the ingredients are absolutely right. The veneer, as I say, look great. They look even better on film, which has a veneer. And they're all played by good actors. And I'm intrigued by this setup. What is the company doing? What's the story behind the curing of the Lazar disease, and this sort of setup that they have. Now I remember this, of course, because this is the first bit of this I saw, because it's the recap in episode 3, which I of course saw, which was so exciting. I loved Half Term. I feel I've been a bit hard on Terminus, whilst I think I needed to acknowledge it, early on. I enjoy this episode. I'm sucked into it. I find the dynamic interesting. I find the setup very interesting. I'm just trying to account maybe for why nobody seems to truly love Terminus, and so I have to acknowledge that and sort of look for reasons. And I think I found quite a few. Remiad Farazin is a fine and very accomplished film cameraman. These names: Alec Wheel and Scott Talbot, D. Robson, Jones Stribling. These are names I committed to memory as a youngster. Right, so I think, didn't Dick Coles do Underworld as well? Oh my God! So I think Tim Munro's going, I was in Creature from the Pit and this. Dick Coles is going, it's nothing, mate. I had to design Underworld and this. So, what's my favourite thing about episode 2? Would it be wrong to say Olvia's boots? Would that be bad? I'm going to throw Peter Benson in there, but he's only in one scene in that episode, and he gets his great stuff to do later. But my worry is that Laurence will choose him now, which means that I can't choose him later. There's a lot of tactics in this, but I don't see how Laurence can choose Peter Benson and Bohr this early. I do like the look of Martin Potter as well. I do like the fact that he does look like he could be in a sort of 70s vampire film directed by an Italian, a 70s version of Dracula directed by an Italian film director who not only wanted his vampires to be beautiful, but he thought his Dracula was especially beautiful, and so he would film him in a bath. I've just created a whole film there. And I like it. I've just always liked Andrew Burt as an actor. And everyone hates his episode of Blake 7 as well. And I think it's glorious, and I think he's glorious in it. But Dominic Guard's boots. Am I going to be facetious? I did like that shot of the boots. And as I say, one of my main memories of this story is feet going down steps. I don't care. I'm going to go... Laurence chose Lisa Goddard's helmet last week. I'm choosing Dominic Guard's boots. That's my favourite thing for episode 2. What's Laurence Clark's favourite thing for episode 2 of Terminus? And he might choose 3. And if one of those is the boots, I'm having the point.
Part 2 then. And we're both going to get the same one, aren't we? Because the highlight of part 2 has to be Nyssa taking off her skirt for no apparent reason other than she feels a little bit hot. And then the Doctor readily recognises the plain grey skirt, which could be anyone's, but he instantly knows that's Nyssa's. I also love the fact that Nyssa handily wears an underskirt. The only other person I know that wears an underskirt is my mum, but then maybe I haven't been paying enough attention to what women wear under their skirts. Do people wear underskirts anymore? And also there's Sarah Sutton's amazing acting at being dragged off by the drone robots. You gotta love that.
I think they were called petticoats. People wore petticoats when I was younger. Am I from the Victorian times? But petticoats were a thing. I'm not sure if people wore them under miniskirts, which is what Nyssa's wearing, but it was a good job she was, because you wouldn't have her wandering around in her pants. I suppose I should have thought to choose that because it is a momentous moment. It's probably the most talked about thing about Terminus, and I did try to discuss it in the episode, but I'm slightly perplexed by it because is it there? Because the way it's sort of discussed afterwards is like, oh, it's that moment, but they didn't go, we need a moment here where Nyssa takes her skirt off. So I suspect it probably just came a bit organically, did it? Where they went, oh, Nyssa takes off a piece of her clothing. But it just seems odd, which was the chicken and which was the egg, and the fact that it then gained so much traction afterwards. I just think it's a slightly bizarre and perplexing moment, and because it's not a sexy moment, is it? Because pretty much what she's wearing underneath is the same length and covers up the same amount of her as what she takes off. So I find that a bit odd if people go, oh crikey, she's removed a layer to show another layer that's a slightly different colour underneath. So I'm perplexed by the skirt removing moment. I suppose you had to be there, and by the time I got to see it, I'd already had it built up as this great big talking point, and I just saw it and went, oh, is that it? Oh, okay. Well, okay, it's just the same as her taking a jacket off, really, just a bit lower down. But it is the most famous part of the episode. Somehow it's managed to overshadow Olvia's boots. But look, there's plenty in that. I think it's intriguing. I think it's original. I think its intent is good to do something different with the Doctor Who format. I think the forces are working against it, and so that makes me sort of side with it a little bit, because sometimes when you try and do something a little bit different, or try and stretch the format of Doctor Who, it really pays off, and sometimes things just don't work in your favour, but that's not necessarily your fault. And as I say, I'm a big fan of Stephen Gallagher, and I'm rooting for Mary Ridge. It's her only Doctor Who, and she's dead. I wanted to have slightly more of a legacy than we had to start shooting it live, which I think happens at some point, doesn't it, with Terminus? They pretty much did it as live before the lights went off at 10 o'clock, which probably was more frantic and had more pace than the story itself. Anyway, I'd still be entertained watching it of a Sunday afternoon. If I didn't have to talk through it, which I know takes a little bit away from it. I've certainly had pleasant times. As I say, I only really had parts 2 to 4. So I find part 1 a slightly undiscovered country and a little bit of an interesting curio, and I like the fact there are parts of Doctor Who that are still like that for me. So yeah, it's all right, Terminus. I'm rooting for you. I'm hoping it starts to come together for you, and that will hopefully happen in part 3, which was the episode I got to see at half term. So for a very long while, part 3 of this, alongside Arc of Infinity, were the only bits of season 20 I saw, which resulted in there being a great hole in the centre of my universe. But fortunately, I live in a happier time and place now, and I hope that these blatherings of mine find you in one too. And until the next time, goodbye. Thank you so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke, and my special guest, Laurence Clark, who can be found on Twitter at Laurence_Clark. Laurence with a U, Clark without an E, as in not Venezuela. Thanks ever so much to patrons who make these broadcasts possible. I'm going to mention some of them now. Dave Owen, Matthew Newton, Nathan Moore, Stuart Mitchell, Rossa McPhillips, John McClay, David Matthewman, Nathan Martin, Gavin McLean, James Lark, Guy Lambert, Clive Lewis, Ashley Knight, Andrew Jordan, Jessica Jones, Dave Hoskin, Lisa C. Greco, James Gould, Gary Gillett, John Elledge, Mark Dakin, John Curley, Richard Chalk, Andy Case, and Paul Carnahan. The music for these podcasts is by Dave Gates, and the podcast artwork by Dylan Patterson. So, Toby, how can you make your Patreon plug less repetitive? Because you've done it quite a few times now, even though you're sure that nobody actually listens to this bit. Well, Toby, I think what I'd do is I'd say people can get extra material, bonus releases, interactivity, and stuff that comes out well in advance of when you're listening to this. So if you're listening to this now and you're not a patron, now could have been 4 months ago. Imagine that. Oh, that sounds good, Toby. And does it cost much? Well, I mean, tiers go up to, as high as you want, really. There's no limit. But they start from as little as £3 a month. £3 a month. I mean, that's cheaper than some Tupperware. And all the Tupperware does is languish at the back of the cupboard because I can't find the lid for it. Well, I think you're buying the wrong Tupperware, but that's not a conversation for right now, because Tupperware aside, you can also get a 10% discount on that £3 a month if you sign up for a year in advance. You commit to a year, you get a 10% discount. Am I really going to want to commit? Yes. Oh, okay. Why did you put a note of caution in that? This is a plug. Well, I'm sorry. I thought I was supposed to throw you questions and then you could text. I am you. This is so contrived. I know. I'm just trying to make an advertisement interesting. Well, I think you failed. Thanks very much. So what if I was to say an alternative to Patreon is Ko-fi, which is kofi.com/Toby Hadoke, where you can just give money at any point, at any amount, if you like a particular broadcast or just feel particularly well inclined to the person, in this case Toby Hadoke, which is me talking to you, and who is also Toby Hadoke. You made a bit of a meal of it, but I like the humility. Anything else? Well, I think we should say that people don't have to pay money. It's much appreciated because you are a self-employed artist. I hate the way you say. Look, I don't say you hate the way I say it as if it's something I always say, but it's because I think people may think that you've got a steady income stream because you seem to be always doing stuff. What? They don't realise that you're always doing stuff like this that doesn't actually pay money unless people actually pay for it. Yeah, but you're laying it on a bit thick now. Okay, so if the money thing is not a thing, because it's not a thing, you do it for the joy. I do it for the joy. I've actually swapped characters. I was the humble one, and now I'm going on the attack. I do it for the joy, but I've got children to feed and educate. Right, yeah, we have got a sort of Jekyll and Hyde thing going on, but Jekyll and Hyde have kind of swapped hats. It was actually, yeah. Anyway, shall we get out of this? I think we should. But before we do, we haven't mentioned the thing that people can do for free, have we? Oh, no, that's absolutely right. They can go to iTunes or wherever dispenses the podcasts that they listen to and rate 5 stars. 5 stars is really important, gets us to the top of the tree. Us being just me and you, we're one person. It sounds like you're doing a royal thing. Oh, that's very true. Well, us as this group of podcasts. No, all right, me to the top of the tree, and any lines of review means that people have something to read, which improves the algorithms. Improved algorithms improves visibility. Improved visibility means that more people are likely to come across these if they're casually scouring the internet for Doctor Who content, and then they will find this, and then hopefully they'll listen to it and enjoy it. They won't enjoy this bit. That's okay. It's at the very end. They can press stop and not miss. They probably have already. You're howling at the moon, Toby, but Stephen Moffat's listening. Stephen Moffat listens to this. Yeah, I won't mention it. It's a different Stephen. No offence to the Stephen Moffat who listens. I don't mean you're a different Stephen Moffat but you are a different Stephen Moffat to the Doctor Who. Well, not the Doctor Who Stephen Moffat, because you're a Stephen Moffat who likes Doctor Who, but you're not that Steve. You're not the Stephen Moffat that people might think of when I say Stephen Moffat. No, I can't be him now. I just hope he's nodding along. Even he might have switched off now, and he listens right to the end. Poor man. This was an attempt to make this plugging bit a bit more interesting, and all it's actually done is make it longer. Yes, I know. Are you regretting it? Yeah, but not enough to do something else, because I've committed now, and I don't want to have to do it all over again. All right, Patreon, Ko-fi, ratings. Please do all those. I never want to hear from you again, and I never want to hear from you either. Goodbye. Bye. I think that was longer than the episode commentary. Sorry, I've just realised that, and when I was doing that, I did actually face in a different direction depending on which person I was being. I didn't bother with trying to do different voices. Anyway, follow me on Twitter at Toby Hadoke, these podcasts at Hadoke Podcasts, and check out my comedy night, Excess Malarkey, which is in Manchester every Tuesday night and online on the first Sunday of every month. Sorry, Stephen, who might not even be listening now. Sorry.